الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. So inshallah we are, this is the third last class. I know time flies. Inshallah the goal is to, it's normally 12 sessions, but I think because we kind of extended a couple of them, we were able to finish almost a session amongst the first 8 that we did. So we'll be able to finish it inshallah in 11 sessions, and that's on purpose as well because if we count from today's the 4th, then the 11th, then the 18th, and most people take time off, travel, want to be with their family because everyone's off. So I'm trying to finish before the break, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll get right into it. The exams are, everybody, I think we talked about that before. The assignment also was submitted. I haven't marked them yet, so bear with me. It's just been a crazy term. I probably won't get to marking them until the break at the earliest. And that's that would be really lucky if I could get my time. Just because I have more travel. Not travel that will interfere with the remaining classes, but it is quite extensive around the days we're together. There will be another assignment assigned based on today's class, and that will be the last assignment, inshallah. And then we will have a final in the beginning of January. The goal is to have it, I think, when the rest of the IDA has the exams, which is the same day, same place. It's just easier to host everybody together. And if you have multiple exams at your different courses, I think there's an accommodation for that as well. But inshallah, that's the plan. Any questions or concerns regarding that? All right, attendance. If you don't mind just scanning the QR code for your attendance, inshallah. Okay. We're good? Lisa? You may have to take a step back. Take a step back. You good? Lisa? Okay, well, we have one at the end, so you get another chance, inshallah. Last time we covered, we finished abrogation and nasikh wal mansukh, and we talked about the concept of specification or takhsis. And then we also started the 7 ahruf, al-ahruf al-sab'ah. We talked about definitions, the various meanings of what they could mean, because they're really left ambiguous for us to understand. But what we do know is that these ahruf are all directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not from the companions. And that in all narrations where the companions differed from each other, it was clear that each one had been taught directly from the Prophet ﷺ a particular harf, and it was inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course. And we talked about how the reason why the Prophet ﷺ requested why there's 7 ahruf is because Jibreel when he came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding you to teach the Quran, to your ummah in 1 harf. The Prophet ﷺ wanted, he's a prophet of mercy, alayhi salatu wasalam, and he recognized that could be difficult on a lot of people from within the Arabs, because everybody had there's a lot of tribes that had different lughat and lahajat, and we talked about that last time. And so he wanted alayhi salatu wasalam to make the recitation and the memorization of the Quran easier for his ummah, alayhi salatu wasalam. And so he requested more until it increased to 7, and so there are 7 ahruf. Now, just a reminder that ahruf is not the same as the qira'at, okay? And I will distinguish them today, inshallah, tonight, in an upcoming section. But we'll kind of continue on with finish off the discussion with the 7 ahruf. This is stuff that we already covered. The difference is, we know that the companions, if you recall last time we had 2 stories of companions that started to argue, and you recited it incorrectly. No, you recited it incorrectly, and they went to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, well, recite in front of me, and they both did, and he said both are correct. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ taught different ahruf to different companions depending on their capability and their situation and their condition, to make it easy for them. At the same time, the differences are not so great such that you can't recognize that the person's reading something else. They recognize that, oh, you're reading Surah Al-Furqan? That's not how you read it. Well, he recognized that it was Surah Al-Furqan. It wasn't so drastic as different. And we'll talk about, I think we talked about what the ahruf could mean. Again, it was left to interpretation. The basic meaning of all of the ahruf is the same. Each of the ahruf is complete in and of itself. And the revelation of the Quran with the 7 ahruf came, of course, in Medina, not in Mecca. It was after Hijrah. And that's because, well, it makes sense, because that's when more people became Muslim, and there's more differences in how people pronounce and the Arabic language. Okay. And then we didn't talk about this, but we'll go over it as well. There's a wisdom, subhanAllah, is a blessing that the Prophet ﷺ, besides the hadith that we just kind of mentioned, with making it easier for people, it is also, at the time, a way to unite the Muslim community on the basis of common language, right? So the Arabic of Quraysh, with minor variations that were, from that lugha or lahaja, again, according to spoken language. It also proves the miraculous nature of the Quran. It shows that the Quran is unique, and it's the way, not just its interpretation, but its recitation was made flexible for people. And that includes not just the recitation, but the meanings and the rulings that you extract from it. And we'll talk more about the miraculous nature of the Quran in the last class, inshallah. So I won't go into too many details now. It has its own whole section, inshallah. And it proves that the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ, that despite the fact that he ﷺ was illiterate or ummi, the revelation of the Quran occurred in different tribal dialects. Isn't that just another sign of the Prophet ﷺ being the messenger of Allah? And it was, again, is the most eloquent and fluent of speech as well. And lastly is to honor the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, and to show its superiority over other nations, that no other nation has been given a book of such manner, right? In varying ahruf, in the ease of the process of its preservation. And the earlier books would be revealed from, in one harf, in one way. The Quran was revealed in 7 ways, or 7 ahruf. Now, I don't want you to confuse the term ahruf with what we're about to go into next, which is the qira'at, al-qira'at. Any questions about al-ahruf before we get in? And if you ask me a question that's related to qira'at, I will defer. Yes? Just speak up, because I can't hear from the mask. The writing, we'll get into the qira'at. You'll see how that kind of works with the different ways of recitation. We'll talk about it in this section. Yes. We're going to go into that. Don't worry. We're going to compare the two, inshallah. Don't worry. That's why I said I'm going to differ, because I know questions are going to come, and this section is kind of two together usually, like it's 2 chapters, but they're usually back to back for this reason. Okay? So actually, it's one of my favorite topics is to the whole concept of the different qira'at of the Quran. Qira'ah means recitation. We talked about that in the very first class, from the term iqra, if you remember. Or qara'a is to read or recite. In Uloom al-Quran, this refers to the ways and the manners of reading the Quran appropriately in its existence. Now there's a history to al-qira'at. We know that the Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran in all ahruf, i.e. just think about ahruf as different ways okay? Just different ways, okay? Just kind of to make the connection easier. And the companions memorized it from him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Some memorized only one way, some multiple ways. And those companions, when they were spread out to the Muslim lands, they took with them the variation or the qira'ah that they'd learned. Remember, the Prophet would teach the qira'ah to different companions depending on their condition and their background. And so keep in mind, the primary way, the primary method of transmission of the Quran was the oral method, right? Orally. That's how Quran is passed down from generation to generation. The written, of course, is there, but the primary method is to do it orally. And so it was, when you learned Quran, you had to learn it or recite it exactly how you heard it. And that's the whole concept of ijazah, is that you're reading it to someone who has an ijazah, from somebody who has an ijazah, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ, and you're reciting it exactly the same way you heard it, right? So this is a fundamental principle in the preservation of the Quran. So we know that from, if you remember, when we talked about Uthman radiallahu anh and his time when he standardized the Quran. Remember, he ordered, he took the copy from Hafsa radiallahu anha, and he had a committee of 4 Sahaba, and they standardized it, and he ordered everything else to be burnt. When he made the copy, the standard copy, he made multiple copies. We talked about that. The estimate's 5 to 7, some scholars say up to 8. Nonetheless, we know that he took each copy, he kept one for himself, and then he sent different copies to different areas. We talked about that before. So Zayd ibn Thabit, he kept it in Medina. He sent Abdullah and Al-Mughira and Abdurrahman Sulami and others to different parts around the Arabian Peninsula. So in terms of, so there's two, there's multiple opinions on whether all of those copies were essentially one copy, the same written copy for all of them, or the variations of the ahruf are in each different copy, right? Now, what's ahruf? It's different ways. Just bear with me for a moment. But nonetheless, I think this is an important thing to kind of keep in mind. But also keep in mind that if it is only the one, call it rasm, right? One way to write it, because Uthman wrote it, he ordered it to be written in the dialect of Quraysh, and every copy that was made, the 5 to 8 copies, were all the same. If that's the case, and he sent it to the different regions, each of the Sahaba that went to the different regions could have a different qira'ah. So the rasm is the same, but the qira'ah is different. And how is that possible? Well, if you remember, there was no dotting, there's no harakat, there's no hamza, right? There's no med, right? Some words, the writing didn't have that. That was introduced later, and it was introduced to protect the Quran because people started messing up when they were reciting it. If you remember Abu Aswad Du'ali, we talked about that before. But the rasm could actually accommodate multiple readings. Multiple readings. So we said before, Maliki Yawmiddin and Maliki Yawmiddin. It's the same way of writing it, it's just different pronunciation based on the qira'ah, right? And that the qira'ah stems from the different ahruf, right? And so the same rasm could accommodate multiple qira'at. And so there is an opinion that says it was all one rasm that was sent to all these different regions, and the Sahaba that went to the different regions all had, not all, but they varied in their qira'at. Another one is that the rasm there was slight variations of the rasm from each copy that was sent to the regions along with the different qira'at. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, the qira'at have been preserved, and we'll get to how that history kind of unfolds. Okay? So does that make sense? The rasm is the same, but you can read the ayah different ways. Okay? Is that like we talked about? يتذكرون and يذكرون, or yes. No. Just no. No, it didn't come in one rasm. But remember, they had different ways. Different Sahaba wrote the Quran scribed the Quran, right, of the Prophet with the Prophet ﷺ. When there was a disagreement, when they were standardizing the Quran, Uthman told Zayd, what did he say to him? The Qurayshi script. Stick with, because the other three companions were from Quraysh. Stick with the Qurayshi script if there is a difference. If there's a difference, like you're arguing, like which one which one's right? Like with tabu and tabut. Give an example, right? So they stuck, if there was any difference, they wrote it with the Qurayshi dialect. Does that mean that everything, every little difference was accounted for and they argued over every difference? Or there were differences that they all knew about and they accommodated? Doesn't matter, the rasm accommodated the multiple qira'at. Whether that was multiple ways or the one way. Even if you pick the one way, it still accommodates multiple qira'at. No. All of it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of it's from the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the qira'at, how to read, is not from the Sahaba. The Sahaba didn't say, we're going to read it this way. No, the Prophet read it this way and he taught them, right? All of it's from Allah. But I'm just distinguishing, ahruf are not qira'at. Ahruf, think about it as like the foundation from which the qira'at came. Okay? We'll talk about the differences in the next couple of slides, inshallah. Yes, Firas.
Is it safe to consider qira'at as an analogy, like accents? So let's say, for instance, the English language. If somebody from England, somebody from the United States, somebody from Australia, you'll hear different accents, but the letters and the meaning is the same, it's just the way it comes out. Is it analogy?
That includes that, but it's not only that.
It's not comprehensive.
It's not comprehensive. It is more to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see, for example, وَسَارِعُوا in one qira'ah, and it's سَارِعُوا in another qira'ah. There's no harf. And it's not that, and again, we'll go into the details. It's not that the words are completely different, although the ahruf could be different. Why? Because we talked about this before. That you couldn't tell, like they could tell because they were experts in the language, but people down the line couldn't tell the difference between a ta, va, bod, and sad, because there was no dotting and there's no lines. And so, وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينَ in one qira'ah, وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينَ in another qira'ah. What's the difference? You couldn't tell the difference between those, but they're two different words. Okay? So it's not just how the word comes out. There are actually differences in how the rasm accommodates both. Both, ضَنِينَ and ضَنِينَ. And they both mean two different things, but they supplement each other and gives a beautiful meaning. Right? So just to kind of go through the history quickly, Islamic scholars record at least 50 different readings. We'll go into how, maybe the next slide actually, yeah. We'll go to the next slide first. So at the turn of the first century of Hijrah appeared the scholars of the Quran, after whom the qira'at today are narrated. Right? So we'll talk about the Qurra. There's now 10 that we'll talk about. And the ruwa, the scholars that narrated from them. But this is where these qurra are from that turn of the first century. At this time, the Quran started to become codified. Codified meaning it started to have rules put in place to protect how it's pronounced and how it's recited. And each of these persons is called a qari, right? Or a qari in English, reciter or reader. And the qira'at are particular methodologies of reciting the Quran named after these readers. And these readers just became, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose them, they became very eloquent in the reading and famous for that reason. And they were leaders in their field. And how the differences, it goes back to Firas's question, each differed in words, pronunciation, and rules of recitation, right? And remember, a lot of the variation you'll see in these like Hamza, right? Hamza, because Hamza wasn't written. Hamza was added later, right? So you'll notice, you'll hear people say, recitations, an-nabi, and another one, an-nabi, right? Or Zakariya, or Zakariya, with Hamza, right? Because again, Hamza is like the kind of like the dotting. It wasn't in the rasm originally, and it was added to, again, protect that qira'ah. So the scholars of succeeding generations started compiling work on the different qira'at. They recorded at least 50 different readings or vocalization systems from Uthman's copy, from the one copy, subhanAllah. And these different qira'at show the range of the opinions that existed on how Uthman, how the Uthmani text could be read. Again, this is based on how the Prophet ﷺ read it. Nobody's making things up. This is how the Prophet ﷺ, because it's oral tradition, right? I heard the Prophet ﷺ recite it this way, I'm reciting it this way, and the rasm accommodates for that. Okay? And we'll talk about how, is it the next slide? Yeah. So there are many compilations that in Islamic history that kind of developed over time, and there's some of them here. For instance, Abu Ubaid al-Qasim compiled 25 qira'at. Ahmad ibn Jabir wrote a book about 5 qira'at, and so on and so forth. There's multiple books. But what I want you to make sure you remember is Abu Bakr Ahmad ibn Mujahid. And he was the one, he's a 9th century scholar. He's the one that kind of compiled the seven prevailing modes of recitation that we know today. And that was of his time. They were 7 of his time. They were from the major cities of the Muslim world. These particular Qaris were very eloquent, very famous, very knowledgeable in their recitation, and they were from, again, there's the diversity of the qira'at between them. They were from Mecca and Medina and Kufa and Basra and Dimashq. And so these are the 5 main territories. And then due to the popularity of Ibn Mujahid's book, these 7 qira'at became the most famous qira'at of their time. Now, 7 and 7 ahruf, they're not the same. They have nothing to do with each other. Okay? That's one of the scholars kind of, after Ibn Mujahid, wished that, we wish he would have picked a different number or compiled a different number of qira'at, because it's confused people. They're not the same. We'll talk about the differences shortly, inshallah ta'ala. So these 7, this doesn't imply that a portion of the Quran, by the way, is left. No. The Quran is complete in every qira'ah. And some qira'at actually are mixtures of different other qira'at, particularly the ones that were not included in the 7 at the time. They were mixtures. So you didn't lose anything in the Quran. The Quran is full, comprehensive, and is not affected by the fact that Ibn Mujahid wrote about 7 qira'at. Okay? So that's at his time. He had 7. After him, Ibn al-Jazari, rahimahullah, took that list of 7 from Ibn Mujahid and added 3 more reciters. And that's Abu Ja'far from Medina, Yaqub from Basra, and Khalaf from Kufa. And that's what rounds the 10 canonical recitations of the Quran. Al-Ashr Qira'at, Qira'at al-Ashr, is that list of 7 from Ibn Mujahid that he gathered, the most famous at his time, from the biggest cities, where the best Qurra. Again, these are known Qurra, right? Again, this is 9th century, so this is a little bit after. And then Ibn Jazari added 3 more that originated from the same localities, and they rounded up to 10. Now, you'll see actually that Imam al-Shatibi wrote a poem outlining 2 very famous ways. His poem, rahimahullah, it's called Ash-Shatibiyya, and it documents the rules of recitation for the Sab'a Qira'at. And it's about over 1,100 lines long. It's a poem, and I don't know if you've ever read it before, but it rhymes. He did within a poem that rhymes over 1,100 lines, and explained the differences of the qira'at and their tajweed rules in a poem. Like, talk about like, abqari, right? It's just incredible. Ibn al-Jazari, rahimahullah, also wrote 2 long poems, Al-Mudiyya, and which is 3 additional readings that he added to the 7 of the Shatibiyya, and then he also wrote the Tayyibat al-Nashr, which is over 1,000 lines of poetry that explains the details of the 10 qira'at. That's how we know the rules of the qira'at from this work. And Al-Muqaddimah of Ibn al-Jazari, you may have heard it. It's about 106 lines of poetry, and it describes the rules of tajweed and the makharij for Hafs and Asim. Okay. So this is how the evolution of the qira'at came. Now, misconceptions. Ibn Mujahid purposefully chose 7 from the Qur'an to match the number of ahruf, and that caused a lot of confusion. Of course, the qira'at are from the Prophet ﷺ, but that led many people to mistakenly believe that the qira'at were the same as the ahruf, and that's incorrect. Okay? Remember, Ibn Mujahid wrote the book 4 centuries after the Prophet ﷺ's death. Another misconception that arose is that the 7 qira'at were the only authentic qira'at of the Qur'an, and anything outside of those 7 was defective and irregular. We'll talk about that shortly, inshallah. But that's also a misconception, and that's not correct. Now, what's the difference? This is what the slide you're waiting for, I think, right? What's the difference between the qira'at and the ahruf? So, do I want to talk about this one first? Okay, let's talk about it first. All right. Qira'at and ahruf. So, loose translations. Qira'at is the recitations. That's what we translate from the root word of qara. Ahruf is styles or modes. It's ambiguous, but they both refer to variants of the Quran, but they're not the same. General explanation by Ibn al-Jazari of what happened to the ahruf. What's the ahruf? So there are 3 groupings. One group of scholars, like Ibn Hazm, held that the Uthman script preserved all 7 ahruf. The one script preserved all 7 ahruf. Such that each harf is found scattered throughout the qira'at. Okay? So there's no one qira'ah that corresponds to exactly one harf. But the differences in ahruf, the modes, is found in the different qira'at. That's one opinion. Another group, this is supported by Tabari, how the Uthmani copy only preserved one of the 7 ahruf. So that all the authentic qira'at are based on the one harf of the Quran, the other ahruf were lost. Okay? The harf, one harf, and that harf encompasses all the differences in qira'at fall within that one harf. Because this is not a strong opinion, but some books you'll read about Uloom al-Quran will mention this. Ibn al-Jazari also based, and Suyuti and others, how the majority opinion is that the copy of Uthman accommodated a number of ahruf, not all of them, but some of them. Okay? So the qira'at represents a portion of the 7 ahruf, but not all of them in totality. And then so the differences in the qira'at, even the small differences, originate from the differences of the 7 ahruf. But not every difference between the ahruf is preserved in the qira'ah. Okay? Different opinions. This is just to explain to you the concept of ahruf in different modes. Should we dwell on it? I don't think it's really necessary. I think just to know the history and to understand that the different modes of recitation can be accommodated by the same text. And the Prophet ﷺ is the one who taught all of this to the Sahaba. And this was what was preserved to us. And of course, there are conditions to be able to say that this is a legitimate recitation. And those conditions are as follows. So there are established rules to differentiate between authentic and unauthentic qira'at. Again, Ibn al-Jazari mentioned 3 conditions in his authentic qira'ah. Number 1, it must conform to Arabic grammar. This is the basic requirement. It can't contradict agreed upon principles of Arabic grammar. Okay? The other condition is the qira'ah must conform to one of the masahif of Uthman, if indeed it was different rasm amongst the 5 to 8 that were produced. If it was just one, it conforms to it already, right? So it must conform to the rasm of the mushaf of Uthman. And then the third is that it must have an authentic chain of narrators back to the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah, we'll just keep it to that. There's also another conditions that the scholars have added, is that the qira'ah must be mutawatir. Okay? And that means that a large group of people pass it on to another large group of people. Okay? And all of the 10 canonical recitations, the qira'at al-ashr that we know, they're all satisfy these conditions. Okay? Now, there are scholars that say if it doesn't satisfy one of these conditions, then it's shadh, we don't take it. It's irregular or it's unauthentic, and we don't take it. There is no laws that are divine that regulate, there can only be 10 qira'at. Okay, so, but if they meet these conditions, they could be a qira'ah. Now, you may hear more than the 10, because some qira'at are variations of the different qira'at together. Okay? So you'll hear, for example, I'm not an expert in the qira'at, but you may hear a qira'ah that will have a certain kind of rule, another qira'ah that doesn't, and then another rule that the second qira'ah has, the first qira'ah doesn't, and then a qira'ah that has both of them, both of those rules. Okay? So kind of a mix of the different variations, and because different rules apply to different parts of the qira'ah. So the hamza could be dropped by some qira'at, whereas some qira'at it's applied. Similarly with shadda, for example, it could be in a qira'ah that's not another qira'ah, but it's in a qira'ah that doesn't have the hamza and it has it too. So just variations are acceptable, and so that's what kind of leads to a large number of qira'at that are acceptable. But again, these are the 10 canonical ones that are verified, approved, and selected by our scholars. Does that answer your question, by the way? Okay, very good. So classification of the qira'at, there are different adopted classifications. We kind of already talked about this. Authentic, sahih, and that fulfills all of the conditions and is classified as a mutawatir. And this is the 10 that we talked about, the 10 qira'at. There are qira'at that are not part of the Quran. They are forbidden. And this is the shadh, or the irregular. They have an authentic chain of narration back to the Prophet ﷺ. They do conform to Arabic grammar, but they don't match the mushaf or masahif of Uthman. Okay? And they are not mutawatir. Right? So they use words or phrases that Uthmanic masahif do not follow or do not allow. You can use them to explain the meanings of the Quran for tafsir. Remember the example that we had of Aisha radiallahu anha in her copy, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى, and she had written Salat al-Asr. So, of course, you can't read it as Salat al-Asr, that would be shadh, but that gives us information and understanding of what the middle prayer means, right? Salat al-Asr. And by the way, that's an opinion. I think there's other opinions, but I think this is, Allahu Alam, the strongest one for that term. There are also a hadith, which is not again, this is opposite of mutawatir, which is one or small group of people or individuals passed on, are part of the chain of narration. There are also da'if or weak. They conform with the Arabic grammar and are allowed by the Mus'haf of Uthman, but they don't have authentic chain of narration. So they're classified as weak, not shadh. See the difference? So when somebody says shadh or weak, you understand based on the definition of what is missing, what the conditions are missing, based on how they're classified. And of course, there's batil or false, or mawdu' or fabricated. They do not meet any of the criteria, and they're completely rejected even for tafsir. Any questions so far? Okay. Now the qira'at, the authentic qira'at, let's go into the 10 of them. Again, they're based on the very famous qurra after the turn of the first century of Islam. 7 we mentioned were compiled or preserved in Ibn Mujahid's book, in which Ash-Shatibi verified in his poem, and the poem, remember, it's called Ash-Shatibiyya. Each of the 7 readings were passed down from 7 authoritative readers or qurra, we said that, and to ensure their accuracy of transmission, 2 transmitters, ruwa, were provided for each of the qira'at. So we'll cover the 10 and then we'll cover the ruwa. So the 10 readers or reciters, qurra, are Nafi', Ibn Kathir, Abu Amr, Ibn Amir, Hamza, Al-Kisa'i, Asim, Abu Ja'far, Yaqub, and Khalaf. And they're from, as you see, from different locations. Some from Medina, Mecca, Basra, and the major centers of the Quran. Yes. Yes, he's right there. Okay, so these are the readers. Again, famous. We talked about them. They excelled at the time. They were scholars of the Quran and this recitation, and they are from the major centers. Now, when it comes to the ruwa, each qari has 2 ruwa to validate the qira'ah, and there's differences between the ruwa and how, because the transmission, there are minor variations between the 2 ruwa for that qari. Okay, so Nafi', for example, he's the qari. He's got Qalun and Warsh are the transmitters, and they have subtleties between them. Okay, Asim, the 2 transmitters are Shu'ba and Hafs. So most people, I'll show you the breakdown of people in the world who recite Hafs an Asim, right? To say Hafs an Asim, Hafs from Asim, right? That is the chain. Okay, and similarly for Ibn Kathir and Abu Amr, what you'll notice. What do you notice actually? I'm going to give you this is this is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 5, 6, 7, and then there's 3 more here. 7, 8, 9, 10. What do you guys notice between this slide and this slide? It's kind of like an eye exam. This slide. Yes. Yeah, duty is repeated, right? He was a transmitter for 2 of the qurra. Very good. All right, so it's not all different. Some of the transmitters are common. If you actually, yeah, Jazakallah khair, that's better. Let me just see here. Yeah, I'm losing it too. Yeah, so there are the transmitters for 2 readers. There's one more I'm missing. What's that? Maybe I'm just maybe it's not part of the 10. So yeah, so Aduri is one of them. What is important to notice here, so there's 10 qira'at and there's 2 ruwa, so there's how many in total? 20. So you may have heard the term there's 20 qira'at. Actually, it's 10, but there's 20 different variations, right? 10 times 2 is 20. So you may hear somebody who's got the ijaza in all 10 will likely know the 20, the variations in between. I think Sheikh Lu'ay, by the way, I think is all 10. Yeah. This is why if you got to access Sheikh Lu'ay, take advantage before he goes anywhere. He's not gonna like me for announcing that, but there's not too many people here, so we should be good. So in the current times, the vast majority of the Muslim world reads from the Qira'ah of Asim, right? The riwayah of Hafs. Now, Hafs and Asim is about 95% of the Muslim world reads this, and this is what most people are accustomed to now. Warsh and Nafi' is about 3%, and that is in the northern African countries, like Tunis, Jazair, and so on. Qalun and Nafi' makes just shy of 1%. Again, that's parts of northern Africa and apparently parts of Qatar. Durri and Abu Amr is again very small, and then Ibn Amr is about 1% parts of Yemen. Again, if you want to learn the 10 qira'at, you would memorize Ash-Shatibiyya, which is over 1,100 lines of poetry. Okay, that's how you'd distinguish the differences between them. I believe somebody in our community, one of the Shabab, I forget his name. Abdurrahman who? No, somebody else. Maybe I don't know about Abdurrahman, maybe he is. But there's somebody else that I think is reciting this to, I think they've recited it to Sheikh Lu'ay, and now they're doing the 10 qira'at off by her. By the way, just to kind of give you an appreciation of how difficult it is. Because I asked Sheikh Lu'ay, so if somebody came and he wants to get an ijazah of all 10, does he have to recite all, like finish one and then go to another one and another one? Because that takes forever, right? I mean, Sheikh Lu'ay's got a life too, right? And so do the Quran scholars, and they have many students. And he told me, he said, actually, no, you would actually go from the beginning of the Quran and you would read an ayah, and if that ayah has any differences amongst any of the 10, you would recite it in all the different ways before you go on to the next ayah. So a page could take an hour. And he told me sometimes a section of ayat could take an hour. And sometimes it's so common that you can get by a couple of pages, 3, 4 pages in an hour. It depends on how much variation is for that page. Yes?
How many differences are between and the differences of those specific ayahs in that specific letter across all the
No, they're different. Some of them have similar rulings in some words, and some of them have differences in different words or letters, I should say, right? So it's not consistent. Like this qira'ah is all different. Like one of the main differences you'll see is how to treat the hamza. A lot of variations with the hamza. Some will وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الْأَحْزَابِ, right? Hasan Asim is وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, right? That's a difference. Some take the hamza, they don't apply, but they actually apply a mad instead of a hamza, right? Some don't apply a mad, and some apply the hamza. So there's a lot of variations, and they're not consistent amongst all the qira'at. So you really have to know your stuff, okay? To kind of give you an appreciation. I actually love hearing the different qira'at. It's beautiful. It gives you an appreciation. All of this was preserved, like incredible. And our scholars, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on their souls, like codified it in a way that we can preserve it till the day of judgment. Like they put rules to make sure that the people after them that came will recite it the exact same way as the Prophet ﷺ. Every single time, every single word in every different qira'ah. It's incredible. So you can memorize the Shatibiyya, so that covers the first 10, or Ibn al-Jazari's Tayyibah covers all 10. You can, Shatibiyya and Dura, you could do both, or Tayyibah for just one. And that's over, again, 1,000 poetry lines. Variations, to give you an example, so you could have extra letters or basic words. So Allah al-Ghani, Allahu al-Ghani. Okay? You can have differences in diacritical differences. So, sorry, I'll finish these first. يرتدد ومن يرتدد منكم عن دينه or ومن يرتد, right? يرتد. سارعوا or وسارعوا, I gave that example already. You could have يغفر or نغفر. Notice how the rasm is the same, right? Yes.
Once you've committed to reading or reciting in a certain qira'ah, you have to continue with that qira'ah. You can't.
Don't mix and match in the same. Yeah, like if you go to read in Salah, do not jump from Hafs and Asim to another qira'ah. Yeah. Finish the qira'ah. You can do it in the next rak'ah. Some scholars, don't advise that. I think like with, for example, Sheikh Adnan, he likes to stick to the same qira'ah, I think, in the same salah. Sheikh Lu'ay, I know he varies between rak'at. But in the same rak'at, don't change. Yeah. Remember, that's one opinion. There's another one that says there's different. Good question. Good question. This is why there's a difference of opinion whether it's one rasim or multiple to accommodate all the readings. Okay? But it's all preserved. Nobody added these words. Okay? Nobody added these words. Nunshiruha or nunshizuha. Right? Again, with the dotting, you wouldn't be able to tell. But with the dotting, one qira'ah says nunshiruha, which is to revive, and nunshizuha is to raise up. Slight subtle differences. هم عند الرحمن هم عباد الرحمن. Okay? One means they are the slaves of the most gracious. One, they are with the most gracious. Yeah. Beautiful. And it gives you a different, complementary meaning. It's quite interesting. Yes? Well, and ibad is different. Look at the writing, it's the same. Take out the harakat and the dots. It's the same word, right? You wouldn't be able to tell now, but because the qira'at are oral tradition that was preserved, right? One qira'ah could hum inda rahman and hum ibadur rahman. Right? And so when the dotting happened, for each qira'ah, to preserve each qira'ah, the dotting placed it on in different ways. Right? The Prophet recited it both ways. This is why this is incredible science. Right? Honestly, we're not doing it justice with one class, really. It's just an intro. And I personally would rather just bring, somebody else here to speak about the qira'at and actually recite to you the different qira'at, because it's absolutely mesmerizing. يخادعون or يخدعون, right? They deceive or they seek to deceive. Right? يخادعون is they seek to deceive. يخادعون الله وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم. يخدعون is they deceive. ساحران or سحران. So Sahiran is two magicians. Sihran is the two works of magic. Again, the difference is just that med. That's not a letter, it's just added later. Okay? Basmala, there are different opinion whether it constitutes an ayah or merely a phrase that's said for blessings between the surah and is meant really just to identify one surah ending and the next one beginning. So difference of opinion on the basmala. Is it part of the surah or not? Shafi'i and Ahmad say no, basmala is an ayah. Okay? And that's why I recite it personally out loud in the salah. You notice some recite it under their breath. I follow Shafi'i in the Shafi'i madhab in general, and so this is why I do it. Yes.
Would the exception be Surah Al-Fatiha or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim?
So every time it's mentioned, it's an ayah, including Surah Al-Fatiha, for sure. Yeah. And then some say it's not part of the Quran, like Imam Malik and Abu Hanifa. Yes. So so I have to check, to be honest, I have to check for Surah Al-Fatiha specifically, because I'm not well versed in the other schools of jurisprudence. But yes, so if you missed it, if it includes Surah Al-Fatiha and you didn't say it, then the salah still counts. Because remember, if you don't read Surah Al-Fatiha in its completion, the salah doesn't count, right? It's a rukn. You have to. And so this is where the difference of opinion. I follow the Imam Shafi'i, and I know others that pray here also follow Imam Shafi'i, but they say it under their breath. It's an ayah. I take that opinion, so I say it out loud. Allahu a'lam. Scholars are in agreement, though, that it does not form part of Surah At-Tawbah because it doesn't have a basmala at the beginning. All right, so what are the benefits of the different qira'at? It facilitates memorizing the Quran. It's proof that the Quran is a revelation from Allah, not a single contradiction. Not a single contradiction between the different qira'at. You think, oh, there's variation, nothing contradicts. And proof that the Quran has been preserved exactly in different modes. Not just one, but many modes. And that again speaks to the miraculous nature, and there's no stagnation that might exist regarding the text of the Quran. That's all I had for today. Any questions on the qira'at? Yes?
Okay, we know they're different, but what's the reason? Like, is there hadith or because there's a verse in the Quran, so we consider the qira'at and nahw different? Like, why are we taking with
Remember, the concept of qira'at did not come at the time of the Prophet ﷺ.
so that's the meaning.
Like qira'at, how we understand it, right? The Prophet taught the Quran, the different qira'at to Sahaba. They didn't just say, oh, this qira'ah is Hafs an Asim. They didn't say that, right? But they knew that this is one acceptable way to read the Quran. Obviously, the different qira'at come from differences in the ahruf. Now, is it a qira'ah per harf? It's not, right? Some scholars have said the variations in the qira'ah are the variations in the ahruf. Some said no, the one harf accommodates all the qira'at, and some it's multiple ahruf, not all of the 7 that are still within the qira'at. But we know that the differences in the qira'at are basically codified, right? Those came from differences in how the Prophet recited, and that we know is based on the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, when he came to the Prophet and said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs you to teach your ummah to read the Quran in 7 different ways.
Where did Hafs bin Asim originate from again?
Hafs an Asim, so my memory's failing me. It's Kufa. Ahl Kufa right here, right? That was just, is that just to show off? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
When you said qira'at al-shadda, the only reason was it doesn't match the writing. So this condition, like if some scholar doesn't consider it as a condition because they're considering the order of recitation, would that include so many other recitations of
Sorry, I'm not understanding the question clear.
qira'at al-shadda? One of the conditions that it doesn't meet
Yeah, let's go to it. Yeah.
it does not match the writing
Mhm.
or the script,
Mhm.
the Uthmani script.
Correct.
So if that condition is not considered by one of the scholars as like as a reason to consider it as part of the good recitations or the recitations that we can use, so it means how many other recitations will be included more than the 10? If that condition of not following the Uthmani.
Oh, you're saying if it's not a condition, how many other ones?
Because this was I think the only, it just does not match the Mus'haf. And I'm not mutawatir, but it's already linked to the Quran.
Yeah, so the linked is different than,
And mutawatir.
those are 2 different things, right? And conforming to the Mus'haf of Uthman is something different as well, right? So if there's differences, I maybe not understanding your question, but if there's differences or there's not a strong, authentic chain of narration back to the Prophet ﷺ, it's called da'if.
And this is da'if.
Yeah, you're talking about if it doesn't conform to the Mus'haf of Uthman, it's shadda.
But this is, we said, let's say we remove that condition. So
Right.
how many other
Oh, I don't know the answer to that.
There are so many.
There's a lot of them. Even the time of the Sahaba, I mentioned, or Tabi'een, there's about 50 at least, right, that were compiled. Some books had 25, some have 50, and there's many, many variations, right? Again, a lot of mixing and also matching, right? Because they all stem from the source of 7 different modes, however, whatever that is defined as. Yeah, but there's a lot. But we have codified 10. Some scholars say, is it not Quran if it's outside of those 10? No, it's still Quran, as long as it meets those conditions. But those are the 10 that are codified. Yeah. Or, yeah, they're basically not codified. The system's codified. They're considered to be validated, verified, and approved, and authenticated. Yeah, canonical they call them in English. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I remember that there was a Mus'haf copy that was a Mus'haf al-Muhammad, and that like was like in Maghreb, like in the country of North Africa. So when I looked like at the Mus'haf al-Muhammadi, it doesn't look that it does have like dots like the one that we have like in the copy from Al Saudi or like the other copy from Sham and like this region. It doesn't have as much dots. So I thought that like when I went to the to explain why that, because like they didn't need like to, so like we took the ending and I don't know Muslims are Muslims, so like we didn't need to add dots like to read.
We didn't add the dots. This was
Yeah, I was like
he started it. He didn't add dots for everything. He started it, but his students kind of established it as a codification process.
oh I thought he's the only one who
No, he started it, and then his students took over. He didn't do it for all the qira'at. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Inshallah, in part 2 of Uloom al-Quran, inshallah, when we do that, we'll go more into these details, inshallah. I think it will be beneficial. طيب, جزاكم الله خير. We have 2 classes left. The next class we will cover tafsir of the Quran. We're not going to do tafsir. We're going to cover the concept of tafsir. And then inshallah, Ijaz al-Quran is the last one, which is the miraculous nature of the Quran. And then we will finish the course, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله